What's up, everybody? Lou from Hypocritic here, back on the show floor at PAX Unplugged 2025, and look who's back.
Hey, it's me, Dave Guskin, game director of Riftbound.
Wow, we are catching up on all things Riftbound. Thanks so much for taking some time
Of
again.
course, yeah, no problem.
Riftbound's out.
It is.
Available worldwide.
Yes,
How
finally.
exciting. How has the reception and the joyous celebration been from Riot's perspective?
Yeah, I will say overwhelming. It was overwhelmingly positive from just players getting their hands on things, getting to play, trying out new stuff. Obviously, it's been out in China for a little while. Players have been observing that. Now people are coming in with their own kind of ideas about what to build, which is pretty cool. Obviously, also overwhelming in the amount of player feedback we're getting about how do I get product? What do I do here? So that's all stuff that we're still working out internally, trying to make sure everyone can play if they want to. But yeah, it's just been overall really great. A lot of great feedback. A lot of people really excited about playing Riftbound.
Yep, and we'll be touching on all of that. Don't you?
Don't you worry.
So, Origins now having a really solid foundation and so much popularity all around the world. It is one set of many, many to come.
That's right.
With Spirit Forged and some others coming. Your panel earlier this weekend had a ton of announcements and a ton of information out there. Can you give us a brief recap of some of the things that you talked about?
Yeah, so at the panel that Jimmy and I did, we talked about kind of the future of Riftbound, both in terms of play. So obviously Spirit Forged is coming out very soon, in December in China, and then in February, rest of worlds. And then also premiere events that are coming up. So we talked about the next regional qualifier, one in Europe, in Bologna, Italy, then the next one in Las Vegas, Nevada, right after that, and then more throughout the year. So check that calendar if you want to see it. And then, as you're kind of alluding to, more sets as well. So after Spirit Forged is our third set, which is called Unleashed. It's kind of got a little jungle-y theme, a little bit of cool Monsters from Summer's Rift, more jungling champions. Vi is our center character there. And then set 4, which is called Vendetta, is also coming kind of later next year, Q3, I think, or so. And that'll be more about kind of like enemies and kind of like rivalries, and Akali is kind of our main character for that.
And obviously more info to come from all of that stuff, but not today. So we will
Right.
we will get there one set at a time. So with all of that roadmap now revealed, I think it's really interesting to dig into a little bit how those sets come to be from design to release.
Yeah.
With Origins now out and all of the rest of these in the pipeline, can you share a little bit of the development timeline of all of those future sets from Spirit Forged on? When did you typically start working on those? What does the timeline look like from initial development to release? How long does that take? What does that kind of look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so I'll preface this first by saying it's a totally new game. It's definitely new to Riot to work in the physical kind of like game space. And so we're kind of learning as we go a little bit about the process and trying to get things a little bit more steady state and kind of stable. So I would say that like wildly different for various sets. Like Origins took the longest, but we also spent time doing the visual redesign. We spent time getting a lot of feedback from players, especially even about the game systems, because Origins is also the first time people are exploring the game systems. Spirit Forged took less time than that, but still a fair bit as we were kind of getting our legs under us. And then now I would say kind of into the future, past Vendetta, for example, we're a little bit more stable. In general, what will happen is we'll do like an initial kind of theme and mechanics brainstorm, think about how it fits into the rest of the sets within that year or within that standard. That happens pretty early in the process. And then about 1 to 2 months after that is just doing prototyping of various game mechanics, talking to internal folks at Riot about the champions and which colors they might fit into, and whether there's other events happening within the Riot ecosystem around that time. And then a few months after that, usually about 3 to 4, we'll do playtesting, really iterate on all the decks and the balance of the cards, try to understand what the competitive environment might look like, try to understand which multiplayer cards would be awesome to put in. And then it's kind of like done from the Riot design perspective. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens about typesetting the cards, laying them out, making sure that all the text fits, make sure that the art matches with the cards. All that is still happening kind of like in parallel and beyond that process. And then we kind of partner with UVS Games and with Shining Soul in China, and we do all of the kind of transfer over to the printing process, manufacturing, and then once it's actually printed, you got to ship it, you got to distribute it, and then stores will get it and they run their events. So all told, I would say the shortest we've ever done it is probably like 12 months from inception to in players' hands. But I think it's generally been a bit longer than that, especially when we're trying out new things. So, we'll start things earlier if we think we need more time to be able to do something.
An entire process. It is not just snap your fingers and make cards.
Yeah, right.
How about that?
I wish.
Absolutely. So player feedback obviously has been super helpful, not just in that initial sort of design process, but I imagine as the game is moving along and people start to understand the game, understand some metas, what do they like, what do they don't, all the way back from the Project K days and reveals in Macau and all the things that you talked about in the panel, to now and still sourcing feedback and thoughts from players. How, if in any way, is Riot sort of taking that feedback from players on Origins, on things that are announced in Spiritforged, et cetera, and incorporating that into potentially future sets? And if applicable, what does the potential timeline look at from that perspective of, we found this out for Origins, when could we potentially see that down the road?
Yeah, great question. I think the main thing is we're always listening, and we have regular meetings internally and partnering with UVS Games and with Shining Soul to talk about like, hey, what can we do about this? And so kind of first is like, we take in as much data as we can from players. Some of that is like, overall sentiment on socials, for example, or like people talking to us at events like this. Some of it is like people writing in or, mentioning us in the things that they do, like content. And then, we kind of triage the problems, right? Figure out like, what's the most urgent, what's the most important? And then we start talking about, well, if we solve this, what sort of solutions can we do quickly? And what sort of solutions might be more appropriate or more long-term thinking, but will take longer to release? And it just kind of depends, right? Like, I wish I had like a one-size-fits-all for all problems, but I don't. And that's okay, right? So for example, recently players identified like, hey, we're getting only one rare in the pack, and you said there were supposed to be 2 rares, which was awesome to hear. Well, it wasn't awesome to get that as reality, but really good that players are giving us that feedback so we could learn about it. We're like, wow, this is urgent, this is really important, let's talk about it as quickly as we can, come up with some solutions. And we came up with this kind of, hey, you could write in for a rare replacement if you got a pack that was not up to that expectation. And so that kind of process is kind of unique for each of the problems, but we have a really powerful, I would say, strike team at Riot. We have a powerful strike team at UVS Games, same with Shining Soul. And we kind of talk about, now that we're out and we're a live service game, we got to keep listening and kind of reprioritize as we see feedback from players.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you talk about triaging, you talk about what's kind of most urgent for the player base, and stop me if you've heard this one, like people want more product.
It's true, yeah.
As much
I
as
have
they
heard
can. I believe it.
But I won't stop you, keep going.
So from that perspective, obviously, again, as we said, it's not just sort of a snap your fingers and more boxes appear in LGSs around the world. There is a lot of that development and manufacturing and distribution process that has to be considered. So when faced with feedback like that, we really want more product, can you ramp it up faster? What are some of the mechanics and steps that both Riot and UVS are taking or have taken to get more, of Origins, for example, in people's hands while still maintaining production on Spiritforged and future sets and everything else?
Yeah, it's great that you call out like, hey, you got to maintain the future too, right? Because you don't want to sacrifice the whole future just to make sure like, hey, emergency, throw all the levers, let's get as much Origins out. It's like, oh wait, now we have the same problem or worse with Spiritforged. So it's been a careful process, I would say, right? It's kind of like akin to steering a really large ship, right? You can change course, but it takes a while for everything to kind of move and catch up. So what has happened is, as we've kind of watched, local game stores talking about how much product they need, thinking about distributors and how much orders they're sending to us through UVS, we talked about like, okay, cool, like how much should we print? We pick a target, it's a little bit off, and it's a lot off, it's a new game, right? We're all new to this process, and you don't know the first time you release a set how many people will actually want Origins, or just saying they want them, and then when they go to buy it, they choose not to, right? So we did our best to try to make sure that we got a quantity that we thought was reasonable, and it turns out, okay, maybe we undershot. And so we're doing what we can to accelerate processes to get product, through the printer, out onto boats, for example, or planes to get them to the places they need to get to as quickly as we can. Because ourselves and UVS, we're aligned on, we want players to have the cards they can play. That's the most important thing, and we're trying to do what we can to make that as seamless as possible, as quickly as possible.
Which is all great to hear, and is exactly what I think people are looking for. When you consider future sets too, now that you have a little bit of data under your belt, you understand what the demand sort of looks like, what players' expectations are, has that influenced production plans for something like Spiritforged, which I imagine is already pretty well in the pipeline already, or future sets like that as well? How have those kind of things meshed together?
Yeah, definitely it's influenced it. I mean, I think we get better and better over time at kind of predicting what we think demand will look like, and therefore creating supply we think matches that demand. Now, we're never going to be 100% perfect, especially if, hopefully, fingers crossed, more and more players come to the game. That's also going to be like, okay, well, there's more and more demand. So we also have to kind of predict how much we think this prediction will change over time. And so I think we've gotten better with Spiritforged. We've definitely learned some lessons from Origins. We had some time to respond. There are some levers you can pull quickly and some that take longer. So we pulled the ones we could to get stuff into Spiritforged more quickly. And I think we'll get better and better over time as we start planning for, Unleashed and Vendetta past it. I think over time, our stores, our distributors, ourselves will get better at the whole process of predicting that and getting the product out on time.
And it's not just a question of availability, but also individual player access and allocations, right? So if I recall, some programs were recently announced or teased where, certain game stores or suppliers will be rewarded for, if I'm quoting you right, player first policies or mechanics that
Right.
reward people, sort of distributing their allocations fairly and equitably and things like that.
Right.
Obviously, we don't have to get into too many specifics here. I know that's sort of ongoing, but can you give us a little more background on where the idea for that sort of program came from, how you're trying to implement it amongst other game stores? Again, I know details are probably scarce at this point,
Okay,
but
yeah.
where did that sort of thing come about?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the Riot Games mission is to make it better to be a player. So everything that Riot does, and by extension, the people who we choose to partner with, we want to put the players first and think about how do we, stay in this for the long term and make as good decisions as we can for players. Now, being a player of Riftbound can mean many things. Maybe you're a collector, and we want to preserve the value that you have from the stuff that you open. Maybe you're just a social game player and you want to play with your friends around the kitchen table. We want to preserve that experience for you. Maybe you're a competitor. We want to make sure you have access to the cards you need to play the most competitive deck you can. And so all of those things are in our minds when we think about what decision we make. What's not at the top of our mind is, let's make a lot of money, right? That'll come later, because if players are satisfied, then they'll show that with their wallets and they'll purchase what they want, and all of us will be happy. That's the goal, is always win-win for everybody across the whole thing, right? From us all the way down to every kind of player that imaginable. And so that's kind of where that came from as a policy. And I think the way that we're going to try to measure it is, hey, if you're a local game store and you're making it great to be a player in your store, that's awesome. We want to support that. If you are taking the product and trying to gouge people or whatever, we want to say like, hey, that's not really player first. That's not really, you're not lined up with the way that we want to make Riftbound for the best in-person social gaming experience as possible.
That makes a lot of sense, and I know people will be eager to see how that sort of stuff plays out over time. It's just getting stuff into players' hands. I want to pull it back a little bit to our first interaction and engagement with Riftbound at PAX East earlier this year.
Yeah.
Game was still in a somewhat kind of formative state. A lot of the card art wasn't locked in, for example. Some of the mechanics, I'm sure, were still in flux. And that development process, again, all the way across time from those initial days of Project K and the Chinese-centric kind of basis of the game as it was initially, through to events like PAX East, where we picked up on this and then kind of kept up with it throughout time there. When you go to events like that, and when you have the opportunity to have the player feedback in that formative stage shaping all of those things, I imagine it's incredibly helpful. So from events like PAX East or PAX West, where it was kind of in this we're sort of there but not yet state, can you talk a little bit about what sort of tweaks and adjustments you were able to make at that sort of in-flight state when you have a lot of these ideas down, now people are getting their hands on it, maybe we can consider these sort of things. What did events like those, where it's kind of in flight, give Riot in terms of feedback?
Yeah, so I'm going to sound like a broken record. There's so many different kind of like levers or knobs you can turn, and some of them you can turn very late, and some of them you gotta make a choice early, and you gotta live with that choice. So Cards and Origins, for example, mostly the champions that we were building decks around and the kinds of like intricate kind of connective tissue of that set, pretty set in stone even by the time we're kind of testing out at Macau even, or at PAX East. And so some of those things we can't really change very much. But there are a lot of things that we are able to change from player feedback. The visuals, they were in flight when we were talking at PAX East, obviously, so any feedback on that was still super helpful all the way through kind of Q1 and even into Q2. Feedback about how the cards feel in terms of their fairness or their fun, we can make little tweaks, right? We can change a design, maybe this is too strong, or maybe this is not fun in multiplayer. So we're able to make some tweaks like that. And then maybe most importantly is, hey, people are learning the game. What's clear and what's not clear about the rules, what's exploitable or not really intelligible about the rules. And that's kind of stuff that we were still able to move on and be able to kind of simplify. You saw probably with Origins, we had quite a large number of errata, not like buffs or nerfs to the cards, but rather trying to clarify how these cards work and to try to make them match into the much clearer rule set. Now, sometimes I would say it's not right to change the card text, even if you think you have better rules, but because we're trying to start with the best game we could, those were changes we made even late into the process, moving into most of 2025.
Yeah, and you beat me too, because I was going to mention the errata, and just that willingness and ability to modify some of this stuff on the fly, improve those places where you see legitimate holes or issues that have to be addressed, and it's always great to see. So from your perspective, again, having a unique kind of purview over all of this stuff, we have a full set out worldwide, so much more in the pipeline, and the stream of that looks really, really healthy. 1, 2, 3 specific things, and maybe like picking your favorite child to some degree, but is there anything in particular that you are most excited about for the future in terms of either the competitive scene, the casual, just like pick up and play it scene, cards, sets, the mechanics of the whole thing? Is there anything that's really, piquing your interest?
Yeah, a few things I would say. I mean, one is the thing that we talked about on the panel, which is as new sets come out, it kind of recontextualizes old cards. So I'm excited to see, now that equipment exists in Spearforged, what does that make more valuable or less valuable in Origins? And then, when Unleash comes out and there's new mechanics there, what does that change about sets 1 and 2? So that's always very interesting to me, and I love seeing people explore the new stuff with the old cards coming into that new stuff, or even exploring old Legends but souped up with new cards, right? That's really exciting for me. I would say another thing that's pretty interesting is like how people play. So 2v2 I think is a pretty interesting format where it blends I think the best parts of multiplayer, where you can have 4 players at a table and you have that really fun social experience, but it's still kind of competitive, right? You and your teammate are trying to win, and that's kind of fun. So there's a lot of cool stuff there, and as we move into the future, I think we've spent a little bit more time developing the content to make it friendly to multiplayer and kind of more interesting for those 2v2 exercises. So those are kind of the few things I'm thinking about.
Fantastic. And again, with one set out, still a lot to come. Great time to jump in if players are new to this, if they're interested, if they want to get involved in their own ways. How do you recommend they either find more information or get involved themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so you can always go onto our website to kind of read some of our articles about how the game works. Go to the store locator and find a local game store. I think that's the best place to go to kind of learn, right? So I would say, if you have friends who already play Riftbound, great, they can teach you. If you don't, or you want to go find a new group to play, a community to be part of, go to your local game store. I think that's probably the best way to get started. And Proving Grounds, if you can find it, we're working to get more of that into the ecosystem as fast as we can, as we mentioned about other product. But that's a great way to start. It's kind of everything you need in a box to play with your friends or with a small group. After that, I would say just explore. Figure out which champion is the one that you love. Start building a deck around it. Even decks that maybe don't seem the most competitive can be very fun in Riftbound, and the games can still be pretty close. So,
fantastic. Links in the description for a lot of that stuff. We'll make it easy for you. Dave,
awesome.
thanks
Thank
again
you.
so much for the time.
Of
really
course.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
Keep it tuned here to Hypocritic GG for more for PAX Unplugged all weekend long.